Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm so privileged today to be having a conversation with somebody I respect and admire and love talking to and learning from. And I'm going to leave you with that for a moment before I do an introduction, but I just wanted to start by sharing a little bit with you why this episode today is just so important. And it really goes back to when I was a kid, and many of you will probably relate. I grew up with a head full of worries. I often couldn't breathe properly. I'd have a racing heart. I'd have trembling hands. And I was constantly asking my mum about my fears, asking her if it was going to be a problem, and she would always tell me everything would be okay. I struggled with what, as you well know, if you're a regular listener, would later be identified as anxiety in my mid-20s. When I looked out at the world and all the people around me, I often wondered all the time why I couldn't be carefree and happy like everyone else. I wanted to be happy. Of course, I still do. We all do. And I am. I really am. But I'm most certainly not happy all of the time. And I'm definitely not carefree. And what I know for sure is that what brings me the most happiness and joy in life also often challenges my happiness more than anything else. And because of this being true for me and undoubtedly true for you as well, I wanted to share how today's guest puts it. No matter who you are or what you do, life is sometimes tough, and tough times demand tough emotions, thoughts, and feelings. These are words written by the wonderful Dr. Helen Street. Helen is an internationally acclaimed education consultant with an extensive background in social psychology. She's the founder of Positive Schools and Contextual Wellbeing, a consultant to schools worldwide, a best-selling author, and an honorary fellow at the University of Western Australia. Her fourth book, Contextual Wellbeing, has become an international bestseller in education. In recent years, it's come to Helen's attention that despite positive mental health being a growing topic of consideration, many of us still remain unsure about how we might build either well-being or resilience effectively and meaningfully. Helen's brand new book helps us all address this challenge. Honestly, this book, I cannot recommend it more highly. It is a book for reference across the lifespan for all of us. It's titled The Impossible Question of Living Well. How do we hold on to what matters while also knowing how to let go? Helen is joining us from Western Australia, where she lives with Neil, who is wonderful. I've had the pleasure of spending time with Neil on many occasions. Their 3 daughters and their very spoilt cavoodle Barney, who I'm secretly hoping shows up while we're recording so I can say hello, but I'm sure that won't be the case, but I can only hope. Welcome, Helen. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Jodi, and it's lovely to be able to have a chance to chat with you, and appreciate the invitation.
Oh, thank you, Helen, and look, thank you for all the work that you do. You and I first met when I was presenting as part of the team for the Positive School Conference a couple of years ago, and what we know about wellbeing in schools is that it is a really large challenge, not just at the individual level of the student or the teacher, but there's a large challenge within the school system, and you do so much work in contextual wellbeing and in systemic change. And before we get started, I really just wanted to give a real shout out to you for that, because it's a big challenge, and it's a challenge that your workshops later in the year will be addressing. So I'd love to ask you about those a little bit later. Coming back to the book, The Impossible Question of Living Well, starting my research around, obviously reading the book and then starting to think about how I wanted, I'm like, how do we answer this question in the podcast? Because it is such a big question. You've tackled it so beautifully. How did you come to writing this book? Why this book from you at this stage of your career?
Well, that's a good question, a big question. As I'm sure you know, Jodi, as a writer yourself, it's a big process. It's a big investment to write a book, and so it's so important. Well, certainly for me, to be writing about something that's really on my mind at the time and resonating with me, and sort of I feel compelled to express and explore in words. And so it would have been very easy to think I'm going to write a follow-up to Contextual Wellbeing right now. But this was the book that was sort of pressing me to put, I'd say pen to paper, but hands on keyboard.
Yes.
And to write. And why is that? I think a number of reasons. In part, because I feel that there are so many approaches to thinking about well-being out in the world right now that are trying really hard, and with good reason, I guess, to try and come up with solutions and strategies in sort of bullet point lists, or in sort of in very concrete terms that are easy to maybe grasp and work with. And that's not a bad thing at all. Sort of concrete, immediately accessible strategies can be incredibly useful. But it's sort of in being caught up in all of that, I feel we're missing something really important, and that is that there is no quick fix to well-being, or that even necessarily a reality to the idea of being constantly cheery. And unless we are also willing to take a more philosophical approach, or just think a bit more deeply about a lifelong journey to navigating the ups and the downs of life, I don't know that we're ever going to find a meaningful way forward with quick fixes. But on top of that, I'm also really concerned about the sort of positive skewing of our focus in terms of considering what it means to be successful in life. And like you, I get anxious at times, and I've had difficult times, and I can be quite introspective, and I can be, I always feel like I can be quite creative and sensitive, and it gives me opportunity to experience huge elation and joy at times. But the cost to that is that I also can feel, quite incredibly upset when things go wrong. And I felt I don't want someone to feel, or I don't want to layer on top of that I might not be as successful as I could be because I feel upset at times, or I struggle at times. And to me it feels it's almost with this whole skewing of what it means to be successful being about happiness and smiling and being cheery and positive emotion, and thinking about that side of life. If we put all of that as a definition of success, what we're doing is we're sort of negating the power of having deep emotions. And although it might be really hard to be distressed by definition, and it might be really hard to be sensitive at times and to lose things, I don't want us to also feel that somehow says we're failing.
Yes.
And so it's a call to, in part, to readdress the power of negative emotions and all that can give us, and to understand life success as our ability to navigate a whole range of emotions and situations, to connect really deeply to things and experience the joy and the meaning and the purpose of that, but also to be able to sit with grief and upset and loss, and to know that is a part of living well. That doesn't mean we're not being successful as people. So that was a lot of what really was driving the book. And in some sort of ironic catch-22 sort of way, the more that we can accept that we're going to have times when we do really struggle and experience significant loss in our lives, the better we can navigate that. And the more that we can sort of hold on to a sense of who we are as we do, and which is really a lot of what this is about. So, and I guess there's one sort of final layer that really I wanted to bring into the book, and that was my my background in social psychology, which comes with a ongoing interest in identity and identity creation and formation. And in essence, I'm suggesting that how we feel about our life and how we navigate our life as a social being, as a person, is all about identity. It's all about how we create a sense of wholeness in terms of who we are as a social being, and how we deal with threats to identity and fracture when we lose and struggle with relationships. And it's not that there's any magical bullet-pointed solution to creating and recreating our identity, but it's the more that we can understand that as a process and know what's happening, the more we can embrace that through good and bad times.
Can you tell us more about how we come to have the identity that we have, and how we can start to reflect on our identity and how that changes when losses, change, disappointments, rejections come our way in life, so that listeners can start to think, all right, well, I've never really thought about my identity before. Like, how do I identify? And we hear that expression in terms of gender and the like more recently. But how do we understand our identity, and how can we use our understanding of our identity when it comes to navigating the inevitability of change in life, some bigger than others?
Yeah, for sure. Well, in this sense, I'm thinking about identity and understanding identity as a representation of ourselves as an individual. How do we understand ourselves as an individual in terms of how we connect with the world, in terms of how we express ourselves, what matters to us, what drives us, our character, our personality, the roles that we take on in life. In every aspect of living, we have a sense that we are an individual. And what does that mean to us? And that really summed up is our identity. So we're born as a unique human being. And as much as we're going to have a unique physical appearance, we'll also bring some unique temperament and character to the world. And then, but we don't really become a social being until we start interacting with that world around us, which obviously is going to happen as soon as we meet the world, we come into the world. And that's going to start developing in us an understanding of how we are distinct from the world as well as being part of it. So we're going to start off with a sense of being, firstly, that we are a separate being to others, that how loved we are, what it is to love others. We start to develop language, and that means that we start to structure our thoughts with language. And of course, depending on where we're born, that's going to have a different impact on how we understand and think, how we understand ourselves and become a social being. So as we grow as a child, that process is going to be quite transformative, and hence we see our children change day to day. And I always joke to my adult friends that time appears to stand still if it wasn't for the rapid growth of children around us.
Yes.
But it's still a process that's ongoing for us, no matter what age we are. We're still experiencing different aspects of the context around us, and that's still influencing us in different ways. And in the book, I talk about, as an adult, that we're more flowing through life like glass, as in day to day, we feel like we're the same person, but we're still flowing, we're still moving with the ever-shifting context of our lives. And when we identify strongly with something, when we form a deep relationship with something or someone, then it becomes a really big part of how we define ourselves as a person. So for me, say being a daughter, being a mother, being a partner, being an author, there are many ways, an artist. There are many ways in which I define myself. And then if I have a threat to one of the relationships that I hold on to for that self-definition, then it's going to threaten my sense of self. It's going to threaten my identity. So in the book, I talk quite a bit about losing my father.
Yeah.
that was a relationship that I deeply defined myself by. And so when I lost that relationship, that filled me with grief. And the grief really represents the fact that I've had a big fracture to my social identity, to how I understand myself in the world. And that takes time to heal and to move on from. So in that sense, I want to encourage people to think about their emotional reactions to things that happen in the world as really a reflection on how they're understanding their sense of wholeness as a social being. When things go wrong in our world, we find them stressful or distressing because they threaten or fracture our understanding of ourselves within the world. So the deeper the connection, the deeper the sense of threat or loss or fracture.
Yes.
If it matters, it matters. Hence, we can sort of take a guess at how upsetting something might be for someone by relating to our own experiences and the experiences of others around us. But we can never really know in its entirety how much a relationship matters to someone else. So in that sense, we just have to accept that if someone's really identifying and defining themselves by something, it's going to mean a lot to them if that thing is threatened or lost.
Yes. It is. I hear what you're saying about the passing of your dad and the challenge, the fracture in your identity, and that's where a lot of the grief comes from. But not having lost my parents at this stage, but imagining that on occasion, my dad recently had a stroke, and you can't help but kind of sort of imagine what I mean. And even with Mum, who's fighting fit and fantastic, you can't help but imagine the time when the time comes, and I think about that foreboding kind of grief and the sadness and the hole that leaves. Where does that sort of fit with the fracture? Because it feels to me like I think about there'll just be a sadness of loss and disconnection. And can you help us understand a bit more about how that kind of all ties in?
Well, that sadness, that sense of loss is, in a sense, a loss of part of yourself. So it's not uncommon for people who are grieving, and it might be because of the loss of a person that really matters to them. It could be the loss of a job or a country, or it could be many things. But if it's something really significant for you, it's not uncommon to think, I don't know who I am anymore. Or, I can remember thinking when I moved to Australia from the UK, as much as I wanted to be in Australia, I felt like I'd lost a limb. I remember saying that to someone, and that took me by surprise. Yes. So it's sort of I think we tend to put our attention on what it is that has gone in our environment. But the reality is that the power of that is the part of ourselves that has been lost. So it's Mozart said that the music is not in the notes, but in the silence between. And I really love that quote, because I feel that says so much about well-being and what it is to live well. And the music of our life is in the relationships that we have. And when those are lost, that's a loss to a part of ourselves and how we understand ourselves.
I wonder if people listening are sort of thinking, that's why I don't really want to get close to anyone, or, for those of us that have lost a pet. I mean, you've got gorgeous Barney, we've got our beautiful Dusty. You wrote in the book about Simon when you were 7 and the loss and just how that affected you. I remember I was teaching. I was in my early 20s. I was teaching, and we lost our family pet, and I was still living at home. I was in my still living under the same roof, and I needed a day off work because I was just devastated, absolutely devastated. And I knew that there were colleagues who were probably thinking, and I felt embarrassed. I felt this seems unprofessional. I probably look really young, but I just couldn't. Couldn't help that was a very, the way we relate to our dogs, for those of us who haven't loved them, they are family members. And, for people who are sort of thinking, I'd rather have loved and lost than never loved at all, but some sort of go, do the antithesis of that, or feel like I'll try to protect myself from connection because it's too hard to say goodbye. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is risky to love another. There is a knowledge that when you do that you're going to fall hard if you lose that. But it's a tragedy, I suppose, and it's a sort of a loss of the value of life or the opportunity to live well, to not take the risk to love another. So in that sense, and I think, relating to anxiety, which is obviously very much your expertise, but I feel that there are people, and I know people that I have very dear friends that are too anxious to take the risks to form meaningful relationships.
Yes.
Or even in terms of taking the risk to embrace a career path that feels there's a big risk of failure.
Yes.
Or to invest in a marriage because of they've seen people struggle with divorce. And you can end up sort of living in quite an isolated life because of that. And that, to me, is not a life well lived. That is a lost opportunity. So yes, for sure, you can decide that you're not going to invest yourself deeply in other relationships with others to try and keep yourself safe, but you're not really keeping yourself safe, you're keeping yourself in prison.
Yes.
And because you still need to define yourself, you still need to have a sense of identity to exist. Your relationships are still going to form, but now they're going to form within that very small world. And of course then we see, and I suppose taking it to the absolute extreme, when many years ago, I was a psychiatric nurse, and in the 80s, that's how long ago, at that time, institutionalization was a massive issue for a lot of people who had spent a lot of their lives in a psychiatric hospital. And if you look at that existence as being the sort of the ultimate of not creating relationships with the world around you, and this was sort of enforced on a lot of these people, they were now instead invested in the minute details of the very small world they had. Yes. So if you moved the bedside table or changed an outfit, it would cause a huge amount of distress for a lot of these people because they'd had to invest their entirety in those small details. So in a sense, not only are you losing the opportunity to form great relationships with all of these different things in the world if you don't take the risk to connect, you're not actually living a less risky life in a way. You've now just formed really, really deep connections with very small things that aren't necessarily giving you a lot of meaning and purpose.
And you're suffering anyway, aren't you, as a result of that, and missing out on the joy, the pure joy that comes with diving in and taking the risk and being connected and
yeah. Well, I think that there's a knowing, isn't there? We have a sort of at some level, even if you try to not avoid thinking about it too much, at some level there's a sense of life lost or life unexamined, or that you're sort of just getting through life in a way. And for sure you could sort of not take risks to love others or interact too much with the world or go on an adventure or do whatever, and you could just simply watch Netflix and eat safe food and go out.
Yes.
And I'm talking about people with choices here because, of course, there are times when people are unable to go out or do things.
Yes.
But if you are making a conscious decision to not take any risks and living a sort of life that is just passing time, even though there's a sort of you might feel there's a safety about it, there's also, I think there's a huge underlying untapped sadness that comes with that, a sadness that you somehow are losing the opportunity to experience some of the awe and wonder and beauty of life.
There's a lot of loneliness. We know there are so many people who are lonely, and I can think of a couple of people in my kind of world who I would look at and think they're lonely, and I do what I can, but also I feel as though the risk of reaching out, connecting, going to a venue, a club, a lunch, a class or something. Hopefully, if you're listening to this and you're sort of identifying perhaps as someone who, if you could enrich your life by taking a small risk and connecting, I hope that you might feel more inclined to do so.
And it's really important to be aware that there's no rules to this in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And it's certainly not a case of trying to have 200 friends is going to make you happier. It's not a case of more, it's better. It's about quality of relationships, isn't it? And I guess if you have a very limited small world, the quality of your relationships is going to be very limited. But you can have a really rich, meaningful life with a small number of key relationships. Yeah. So that taking that risk to put yourself out there doesn't necessarily mean going to the party. It might mean, no, I'm part of an art group, and there's 6-7 of us, I think, who have got really close over the years, and that's an invaluable source of social support and connection for me. It's not some big gregarious hanging out. It's quite quiet. We have a cup of tea in the middle, but it really works for me, you know. So yes, I think it's important that people don't think, oh my gosh, I have to go and join the dance club to live well. It might mean something very different to different people. It can be a quiet thing, it can be a small thing, but means a lot.
Yes, and that opportunity just to reflect and consider what that might be. If listening to us having this conversation just prompts you to, as a listener, to do that for yourself and reflect on what's the right fit for you, then that's wonderful.
Think about what matters to you and what drives you. Yeah, rather than what you want to achieve, think about what drives you.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, Helen, and I know you do write about this, that how can we, and if we can, how so, help bolster ourselves in between those moments of fracture to cope better when they arrive in our lives, often unexpectedly? What can we do? You know, in between times, how can we prepare ourselves to cope better? I think about my life, and very lucky to still have both parents. Not everybody does. My husband lost his dad many, many years ago, over 20 years ago, and I know that's an inevitable loss in my life, and I fear that. I don't dwell on it, but everyone listening can relate to something that they know will inevitably, kids even leaving the house or moving out, or just change in general. How can we bolster ourselves in between those times to cope better? Or can we not do that? Is that not possible?
Well, it's probably partly why it's the impossible question. The answer is sort of yes and no, really. So I think absolutely we can ensure that we have a sense of who we are at our core, our strongest sense of self underneath all of those socially created layers, and that sort of unfractured, quite solid sense of ourself is going to be able to, is the self that will carry us through when times go wrong. So that in that, the more we have self-awareness, the more we know ourselves, the more we know what drives us, and feel that we're living a life that is genuine. I mean, I'm sort of trying to shy away from the word authentic because it's so used, and genuine, not necessarily in the sense that we share all with all. So we still have boundaries and limits, but that it feels that how we're expressing ourselves in the world is sort of like ripples back to what drives us at our absolute core. Then that, I feel, is probably the most we can do to ensure that we have the capacity and the strength to survive hard times, and that fracture to those outer layers that can run really deep when it's a really big relationship. And I certainly felt when I've lost really important relationships or gone through really difficult times in my own life, that sort of inner sense of myself has had to take charge and led me through. And in that is really how I think of hope and what it means to be hopeful. So it's a sort of false, self-deceptive way of thinking about hope, to think that hope means that nothing bad is going to happen, or that, everything will work out, because it doesn't really. Everything ultimately will be lost. So instead, I encourage a sense of hope that means a trust in that strong inner, more immovable sense of who we are to help us navigate fracture and loss. So I think that's part of it, just really taking time to know yourself, which is something that we don't do enough in a world where we can be distracted 24/7. on top of that, just understanding this process of constant creation and recreation of self in the world, how the impermanence of all things, the reality of change, is so vitally important to allow us to let go of what has gone, and to not feel a sense of injustice about it or anger about it. And I really believe that it's one thing to deal with the pain of loss and move on through that. It's a whole other thing to deal with resentment.
Yes.
And for many people, they're trying to do both. And as much as, and they might get over or effectively move through the loss, but they harbour and hold on to resentment. And there are many, many people, or maybe, nearly everybody, walking around with some level of resentment, a sense of, I lost something and that's not fair.
Yes.
And there's an anger that comes with that, and an injustice that is quite self-harmful, isn't it, in a way? It's, I don't know who it was, but somebody famously said that harbouring resentment was trying to poison your enemies, but actually you're poisoning yourself.
Yes.
So I feel that the more we can understand impermanence and change, at least we don't take it so personally, even if we might be personally distressed.
It reminds me of it. I haven't done a lot of yoga in my life. I probably should. My body would probably appreciate that, Helen, I tell you. But I remember one of the instructors once talking about non-attachment.
Yes.
And it's something that's recently come back. I don't know, did I read about that in your book? I've been reading so many books lately. Yes, and it was so it's become more front of mind for me, and I've been practicing that more, even with little things, just little things like I popped into Kmart the other day to get a screen protector for my phone, and I just thought, I've got 3 things I really need to get, but I sort of, it's a very, very superficial kind of level of practicing this, but I thought, oh, well, what's available for me will be there and what's not isn't. And, rather than getting, I'm so annoyed and I have to go somewhere else and this is time consuming and frustrating and what if my script, I just sort of thought, I'm just going to try to bring more of this idea of non-attachment into, when I remember, which I don't always remember. But can you talk to us about that and how that way of thinking, where that kind of comes from, and how we can apply it to sort of like the lighter side of life and to the darker side of life as well?
Well, the idea of non-attachment is a very Buddhist concept that is very in tune with understanding and accepting impermanence. And in many ways, we could suggest that the philosophy of Buddhism is all about understanding impermanence and managing change. And the idea of non-attachment is, I suppose it's good to start with what it's not. It doesn't mean not being attached to things. It means connecting deeply and forming really meaningful relationships which we define ourselves by, but doing that with the absolute knowledge and certainty that those relationships will only ever be temporary, that all things are impermanent, if by no other reason than our own death, which is, again, something that it's almost like socially unacceptable to talk about. But it's true. The only, maybe the only certainty in life is that it will end. So in that sense, it's non-attachment is not about what we were talking about before, about sort of like not taking the risk to attach deeply so you don't get hurt. It's quite the opposite of that. It's diving in fully and really wanting to know others, to know your world, to be part of it. Yes. But with an acceptance that it's like sand through your fingers, that it will go and it will move on. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the work of Alan Watts, who was a philosopher who's often been credited as taking a lot of Buddhist philosophy and being able to translate that into a way that the Western world would understand. Yes. And he talks about identity being like a wave, a social identity being like a wave that you watch traveling across the water coming to the beach, and you watch this wave and you see it as a entity, as a thing. You could name the wave as it travels across the water, and yet in every moment that wave is actually made up of different particles. It's not the same bit of water. it's something that's traveling through the water, but it's never the same thing from one moment to the next.
Yes.
And that is in many ways the idea of, sort of encompasses the idea of non-attachment, and that you have this sort of sense of yourself that's created from all your relationships you have, but that's constantly changing as we move through life. And the more that we can understand that, the more that we can take the risk to connect and deal with the loss without all the anger and resentment that comes with feeling it's unfair. I thought I was going to have this forever. I thought I'd reach my happy ever after, just like the movie.
Yes.
We were supposed to.
That's right. And the happily ever after comes and the movie finishes and we're left with this, warm and fuzzies. And we don't want to, or take the opportunity, like you say, to reflect on,
what do they do next?
Yeah, what did they do next? And in our own lives about, the impermanence of relationships, and that ultimately all things will be lost. And
yes. And things like, burning incense is to remind you of the impermanence.
Oh.
It's as the smoke sort of like winds and disappears. Or as a sand mandala that's created, that's taken so much effort and skill and create something so beautiful that's just swept away afterwards.
Yes, yeah. I've seen some beautiful ones at the Happiness and It Causes conference.
Right,
Happiness and Its Causes conference. Yes.
And then at the end, they're just brushed away, aren't they?
That's it.
And it's something really good about that. I wonder if we are trying more than ever to hold on to things forever with our phones around and taking photos of everything as we go. And I think if I was a kid at the beach making some elaborate sandcastle creation, which was probably one of my favourite things to do. When it was time to go home, we'd just all kick it over or knock it down in sort of almost like a ceremonious celebration at the end of the time at the beach.
Yes.
Whereas, and there'd be no phone or camera. That's just the way it was. Whereas now, or I would feel that, my kids are way too old to want to make a sandcastle at the beach. But when they were little, when they were making sandcastles at the beach, I'm pretty convinced that they would have said, "Can you take a picture? Can you take a picture? Can we somehow preserve this moment forever?"
Yes.
And there's something really valuable to invest in the moment, knowing it's going to be gone.
Yes. They're very precious moments. All we really have is now. And
all the more precious. It's sort of, this is not just about dealing with loss. This is about embracing the good times, isn't it? If you know that you're having everything is, all balls are in the air in that sort of rare moment in life where you feel like, things are working really well.
Yes.
Which is quite a suspicious feeling, isn't it?
What's around the corner?
Yeah, exactly. But if we really knew that moment is temporary, we can really experience it and enjoy it, rather than just assuming, okay, that's it, I'm sorted, and not really paying attention, and then being absolutely shocked when it all falls apart.
Yes, that's it. It is. And clearly I was way off the mark when I was thinking about non-attachment in Kmart the other day. So thank you very much, Helen. I really appreciate that you've been able to sort of really help us to really understand what non-attachment means.
In your sense, going into Kmart, you could look at it in the sense that, and I know it's a small thing, but it still applies, big or small. If you really, really wanted a particular screen protector for your phone, you formed an attachment to that idea.
Yes. Okay. So
So in some way, you've got an image of yourself getting your phone out, and there it is. And this is a part of how I'm identifying myself now. Yes. I'm the person with the cool whatever it is on my phone. And then you've had to lose that little bit of how you define yourself when you go into Kmart and it's, no longer available, or you can't get it, or you've got to get something else. You've got to let go of that little vision of how you saw yourself. And although it's only small, and I'm sure it's very easy to do, it's just a moment of irritation. Yes. The same sort of theory applies.
Yeah, thank you. I've had that experience when I've had my heart set on getting something in a shop, something to wear, and it feels like, my troubles will be sorted when I find that jacket. And of course, we've all been there, done that, and been disappointed.
You see it in children, don't you? So much so. I can remember one of my daughters who does get I've got all three of my girls quite sensitive, but one who was very anxious about a free dress day when she was about 11, which, if you're a bit anxious, is a hugely anxious thing to have to deal with at school.
Yes.
And she had to wear this particular unicorn onesie because that's what everybody was wearing. And we ended up driving across Perth looking for this particular unicorn onesie so that she would feel the same. And they were just, obviously, every mother was trying to placate their daughter's nerves, and they'd sold out. And but it was devastating. So it really matters. It's really hard to let go of the idea of yourself in the future when that doesn't quite work out.
Yes.
And it takes practice, doesn't it? It takes practice to let go. Yeah.
It really does. And I love that you've shared that example because I was thinking of something my psychologist said to me a long time ago when I was suffering with depression, and of course you just feel the lowest of lows and cry the most tears, and it's just pure sadness. And I feared a lot at the time about losing my dad. I'm not sure what was going on with Dad at the time. This was obviously in my mid-20s, 25 years ago. Dad's still kicking on. But he said to me, you have experienced the most sadness a person can experience. You've been as low as a person can go, and you have come out the other side of that. You will do that again. And it was an empowering thing to learn about myself, in that I'd had great distress, severe distress, and I'd come through it. And that experience of having overcome difficulty strengthens you for the next time, knowing that I've had difficulty before, although not all difficulties are the same, of course. Of course, they can be so different, but that you've experienced great hardship and you will again, but you got through it this time and you will again. And that was what he was.
Get through it well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. You can navigate it well.
I wonder with our kids, because they haven't had the experience. For example, the first time you lose a pet, like when you lost Simon, when we lost Charmer, our dog, the first time, you kind of feel like, I'll never get over this, but then you do, and then the next time it happens, it will be terrible, but you'll get through it. How can parents listening, I know we're sort of running close to time, but just as a last question, it's been such an important conversation that we're having, and people can continue the learning and the thinking and the reflection by reading your beautiful book. But for those of us who are parents who kind of want to sort of start to share this idea of impermanence or this idea of letting go, the book is called The Impossible Question of Living Well. How do we hold on to what matters while also knowing how to let go? What would be, do you have an idea of how we as parents, I've got a 14 and a 16-year-old, how we can open a conversation about this in a way that might get our kids sort of thinking in a way that they may never have before about the impermanence of connections, relationships?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly it's important to say that if we navigate loss well and we feel that we have worked through it, then it can indeed help us to feel that we have capacity to do that. But that doesn't mean that experiencing significant trauma and distress is going to make us more resilient in the future necessarily. It's really important that we sort of, if we're going to sort of in a way practice loss, that it has to be with small losses that are small enough for us to feel that we can successfully work through them. So you can never force a child to take risks that feel unmanageable or huge, because if they don't feel that they're then taking on that challenge successfully, it can actually backfire and be harder next time. So I think that's really important to say. I would never push a child to take a risk that feels too huge.
Yes.
But what we can do is to, as they go through life and small losses occur, to and this is such a hard thing to do. I'm not very good at this myself, but I still going to offer it.
Of course, thank you.
Is to stand back from rescuing them.
Yes.
And it's just so hard not to rescue your child, isn't it, all the time? And I, for example, one of my children had this soft toy that they absolutely adored, and then it got left behind at a holiday house. Oh. And that's a really great opportunity to actually to learn about loss of something that mattered, but that they successfully worked through. But the tempting thing was to rush out and buy a complete replica, isn't it, of that toy and make it all right, to take away their distress. I love the idea of parenting as being watching our children do a jigsaw, and we can see where the missing piece is. And you're sort of desperate to say, it's here, and put that piece in for them. But if we do that, they haven't completed their jigsaw. Yeah. And there's no satisfaction in that. So I guess from a parent's point of view, to ask yourself when your child is distressed about not having the right outfit for the day, or having a fight with a friend, or a pet has died, or whatever level of distress that might be, to ask yourself, is the right thing here to try and rescue and support or is the right thing here to comfort and cheer on and be there, but not rescue my child in this moment, because they are going to learn about their capacity for dealing with change right now.
Yes. Yeah. I am guilty. It's
hard, isn't it?
It's so
it's very hard not to rescue children constantly, and sometimes it's not a bad thing. I've rushed to the school with forgotten sports equipment on occasion, and I've definitely jumped into rescue at times, and I think that's okay. Okay, because the benefits of helping out, I think, are worth it. But it's hard to it's important not to do that every time, in every instance, which doesn't mean you don't give them a hug or comfort them or help them through their emotions. But yeah,
that's it. And the rescuing we do can sometimes depend on how we're doing at the time, can't it? Like if we can't cope with what's happening with them, and I mean, I did the preemptive rescue by buying 2 of the little bunny rugs when we had our daughter, and until she found the second one, and then she always wanted 2, and I was like, darn it, I had that backup one in case it got lost, but
and now it's even riskier.
Totally.
2.
Totally. And it came from the pain that I remember losing one of my dearest teddies in a supermarket, not a supermarket, it was Maya, I think. Anyway, so I was kind of like, I remember how that hurt. And but then more recently, she was going to school. I was coming here to the studio, and she literally left the house without her school bag, her PE uniform, her lunch, her laptop, and there was just no rescuing that was even possible. I said, have a great day, honey. You'll work it out. Go buy something at the canteen. And she did. So, look, it's, we're all human, and we don't, it's a dance, isn't it? It's a bit of a dance. Sometimes we'll lean in, sometimes we'll lean out. And Helen, oh my goodness, thank you for writing this book. There's so honestly, I'm just holding it in my hand, looking at all the highlighting. There were so many other things I was going to ask you about, but the book is just full of so many examples, personal stories, and really insightful messages and ideas about how we can answer this question for ourselves, the impossible question of living well. But we've had such a great conversation today. I've so enjoyed talking with you, and I wonder if you could please share with our listeners how they can connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing, but also you have 2 very special workshops coming up later this year in 2024 in October and November. Could you please share a little bit about those so listeners who are working in education can learn more about the Positive Schools workshops this year and what they're about and how they can join in?
For sure, and thank you. And I'll just start by saying I really enjoy chatting with you always, Jodi. You're so knowledgeable and wise, and just Yeah, I love the personal sense of you that you bring to your conversations. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
But yeah, so people who are interested in my work can go to my website, which is simply helenstreet.com. They can also, I'm not a huge fan of social media, but I do like LinkedIn. So you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and I often post articles and thoughts and opinion pieces and things, which is reflections, especially reflections on education. So the Impossible Question of Living Well is a book for anybody. It's not specifically about education at all, although I would hope that it would help people young and old. But I do work specifically in education a lot of the time. So and that includes positive schools. And so this year, instead of traditional conferences, I've got the pleasure of working with Justin Roberts from the MacKillop Institute. And also just recently, we've also joined forces with the Australian Psychological Society and some their school psychology section. And we're doing this 2-day big workshop in 4 states, which will be an opportunity for educators to think about how they can realistically create systemic growth in the context of their lives in a way that actually creates meaningful change and is workable and sustainable, whether that's the context of your classroom, whether that's thinking about your staff well-being and your staff room, whether that's wanting to take a whole school approach. Because in my experience, and as you know, I've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
I feel that maybe the biggest challenge of well-being that we have in schools is not so much understanding what's wrong or even what might look right, but managing a process of change that actually feels meaningful and sustainable and manageable and like a sense of growth, as opposed to another fad or a U-turn or an exhausting way of doing things differently. And so it's all about how do you, within your context, large or small, understand what you need to do to grow. And that's going to be quite, although we might have the same principles of well-being wherever we go, every context is unique. So how can we grow your unique context? And that's what this 2 days is about. And I would love people to visit positiveschools.com.au to find out more about that, and more about the work of Positive Schools.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because it's so important, the work that you're doing. And so to have an opportunity, hopefully, to introduce you, if they don't already know about your work, to educators that are listening. I'm sure they are familiar, but just to understand why this year it's a bit different in a brilliant way. So really important work that you're doing. And yes, and the book is for anyone and everyone. So I highly recommend having a look on Helen's website, or where all good books are sold. I mean, aren't all books good books? I don't know. I mean, almost. Maybe not. I don't know. But I just love books so much. I've just and I've really adored reading this, and it's one I'll come back to often. So, Helen, thank you for your time. We've gone a bit over, but I really do appreciate you being so generous today with your time and your insights and your wisdom and you. I love chatting with you, and I'm very grateful. So thank you again.
Oh, I'm very grateful too. Thank you so much, Jodi.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for this conversation. I am so thankful that Helen was able to join me for a conversation on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Have a think about how you can start to take what you've learned from our conversation today and make a little change, or start to think differently, start to reflect, whether that's around identity, whether that's around impermanence, whether that's around diving in deep into relationships, non-attachment, or supporting your children. There was so much we talked about. Thanks again for your time, and I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.